starting Faulkner, his short story Barn Burning. I say starting because we're not going to finish. We'll get close, but we won't quite finish. So I'll tell you now, for Friday, today's Wednesday, right? Yeah, for Friday, if you haven't finished Barn Burning, definitely haven't finished. Read Flannery O'Connor's, not Young Goodman Brown, A Good Man is Hard to Find, which is 11 pages long. It's not very long. And a little introductory biographical stuff, information about her. And I would really like you to, I can't force or require you to, I guess I could come up with a quiz, but there's a link on the syllabus to, it's not YouTube, it's SoundCloud, so you can click on it in the electronic version of the syllabus, of Flannery O'Connor reading that short story. Okay? I don't remember what the venue was, group of girls or something. And you'll hear quite a bit of kind of laughing. And she'll even every now and then chuckle, if I remember correctly. I've not listened to it for a couple of years. Her reading of it portrays the story a bit differently than I do when I'll discuss it in class. It'll be an interesting juxtaposition, so just listen to it. It doesn't take long. It's not that, again, it's a relatively short story. And you get her nice, thick, southern Georgia, middle Georgia drawl that kind of comes through, okay? Faulkner. Bit of biographical background on pages 403 to 405. There's more biographical background on him on page 77, when the short story by him, A Rose for Emily, is introduced. Nobel Prize winner in 1950. He was done writing by then. He didn't really write anything of worth after 1950. So he had about a 20-year period, 1930 to 49 or so, where he was pretty active. Deep South, northern Mississippi, family lived around Oxford, Mississippi, near Oxford, Mississippi for generations, okay? And that's important. I mean, that's important for understanding Faulkner and how he writes and what he writes and such. What's the setting for Barn Burning? Well, before we go there. No, we can go there. What's the setting for, this will lead into it. What's the setting for Barn Burning? When is it set? It's written in 1939. Okay? It's written in 1939 by a Southern white gentleman. Just let that kind of begin as a preface. When is the story set?
The late 1800s after the Civil War.
Late 1800s after the Civil War. Okay? At one point, we're going to be told something about, about Abner's, I think it is, about Abner's experiences, and I think the number is something like 30 years previously in the Civil War. So it's the 1890s, all right? Where is it set? We're not told literally. That is, we are told this is in Forest County, Mississippi. Forest County is where the University of Southern Mississippi is. It's where I did my PhD, okay? None of his stories are set in Forest County, Mississippi, by the way. They're almost all set, with some exceptions, and within some of his novels, things begin in another part of the country and then they come back to here. In this county, Yoknapatawpha, it's not real, he makes it up. Okay? It's based on the county in the introduction on 404 and 405 mentions this. It's based on the county that Faulkner kind of grew up in Mississippi. Okay? And he says at one point, Faulkner said, I'm reading at the bottom of page 405, beginning with Sartoris, a novel he wrote in 1929, third novel, I discovered that my own little postage stamp of native soil was worth writing about, and that I would never live long enough to exhaust it. Okay? The Sartoris, that's the Colonel Sartoris that is referred to in the story. It's the Sartoris Snopes family. It's the Snopes family. Okay? So it's set here. And it's set in mid-1890s. So, what does that obviously mean we are going to be confronted with as 21st century readers? It's written by a white guy in the Deep South in the 1930s. It's set, so the 1890s, 40 years previously, at least. There's going to be language used that most of us aren't going to like. There are going to be terms used that most of us aren't going to like, that most of us are not going to use, okay? Turn on various radio stations, you hear it all the time. Different context, obviously, okay? So, just warning everybody. And I'm not going to gloss over the use of certain words. They're in there, deal with them. So, barn burning. What's the title tell us? Every title gives us an indication of whatever the thing is we're reading about. Okay? Minister's black veil. The minister's black veil, right? That pretty much says it all. Barn burning. What's more than likely going to happen within the course of this short story? Yeah, a barn's going to burn, okay? Look at the introductory paragraph. Is there anything else? No. So time and place, 1890s, somewhere in Mississippi, probably here. Probably. The store in which the Justice of the Peace Court was sitting smelled of cheese. Okay? Notice it's not a courthouse. It's a general store. And then you get a classic Faulknerian sentence. Okay, the first sentence, this page 406 in the 11th edition, the first sentence, it's a little long, but it's clear, it's direct, it's easy to understand. The next sentence is not, because it's exceedingly complex and convoluted. That is Faulkner in a nutshell. That's how he writes. All right? He loves these long, meandering sentences that you often have to go back to the beginning and read again in order to follow where it went from the beginning to the end. The next sentence begins with the boy, and it doesn't end till you get to the old fierce pool of blood, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down. Okay? The boy, comma, crouched on his nail keg at the back of the crowded room, knew he smelled cheese and more. See, the first sentence says, the store in which the Justice of the Peace Court was sitting smelled of cheese. Is that the narrator just making a blanket statement that everybody in that room smells cheese? I don't think so. I think that's telling us something about the boy. Because the very next sentence begins with, the boy, skip a bunch of stuff, knew he smelled cheese. Okay? Is it that he knows he smells cheese because he literally goes, or is it an intellectual knowing there's cheese in this room? And because there's cheese in this room, I ought to smell it. Look at the difference. The boy, crouched on his nail keg at the back of the crowded room, knew he smelled cheese and more. From where he sat, he could see the ranked shelves, close packed with the solid, squat, dynamic shapes of tin cans whose labels his stomach read, not from the lettering which meant nothing to his mind, but from the scarlet devils and the silver curve of fish. This, the cheese which he knew he smelled, and the hermetic meat which his intestines believed he smelled, coming in intermittent gusts, momentary and brief, between the other constant one. The smell and sense just a little of fear, because mostly of despair and grief, the old fierce pull of blood. Okay? He could not see the table where the justice sat, before which his father and his father's enemy, parentheses, italics, our enemy, end italics. He thought in that despair, italics, ourn, mine, and his and both. He's my father, in parentheses, end italics, stood. But he could hear them, the two of them, that is, because his father had said no word yet. So, let's unpack that paragraph. I could literally spend the next, however much time we have, 37 minutes or so, just talking about that. Because there's an awful lot there. Why is the boy sitting in the back of the room? He's a boy. What is this room? At this point, what's its purpose? It's a courthouse. It's packed, we're told. Why? People want to hear what's going on. They want to see this trial. Okay? He sits in the back of the room, and we're told he knew he smelled cheese. Why not just say he smelled cheese and leave the he knew out? Just let it sit there. He knew he smelled cheese and more. Because of what? He could see the ranked shelves close packed with the solid, squat, dynamic shapes of tin cans. So where he's sitting, he can see up against the wall shelves packed with tin cans full of food. And those tin cans have images on them. Go to any grocery store today and look at a can of tuna fish, whatever the brand, and it's got what on it? A fish. Usually a tuna. Starkist, Charlie, the tuna fish. There used to be commercials on TV with them and such, okay? He sees that. He sees the fish. He sees the scarlet devils. I don't know what brand the scarlet devil represents. Oh, man, I can see it, though. I've seen these actual images. But he sees this stuff. And we're told from the cans whose labels his stomach read, not from the lettering, which meant nothing to his mind. So what have we been just told about this boy? He's illiterate. He can't read. But there are still images, like the Nike swoosh. He can see that and go, oh, Nike. He sees the image and he knows what's in the can. Okay? And the silver curve of fish. So the red devil probably isn't the tuna fish. It's something else. Is it cans of cheese? It could be. This, the cheese which he knew he smelled, and the hermetic meat. What's hermetic mean? Air sealed. If you go to a grocery store and you pick up a can of tuna fish, and you're weird, and you take the can and you go, what's going to happen? Nothing. If you smell fish, put it down and run away, because that's not sealed. That's dangerous. Bad, in other words. Which he knew he smelled, and hermetic meat, which his intestines believed he smelled. How do intestines believe? Why do his intestines believe he smells meat? What else are we being told about the boy? He's hungry. He's hungry. He sees that image, and he knows what the image is telling him is inside the can. And it makes his belly juices, kind of turn, and he's like, I'm hungry. Sorry, Some of you, the looks on your face is like belly juice, gastric, stuff, okay? So, narrator goes on. The hermetic meat which his intestines believed he smelled, coming in intermittent gusts. That is, this thing that he believes he smells. In intermittent gusts, momentary and brief between the other constant one. What's the other constant one? It's a smell. It's not a literal smell, though. The smell and sense just a little of fear. What have we been told about that smell and sense? It's constant. It's always with this boy. See, the smells of cheese and meat, they come and go. This one, he carries with him everywhere. The smell and sense, just a little of fear, because mostly of despair and grief. Whose despair and grief? His. He's a little boy. Should little boys be full of despair in ideal world? I can't ask that. I used to be able to ask that question, 20, 30 years ago, and most students would say no. But a lot of students would now say, look at the world around you, doofus. I mean, if you're a little 10-year-old boy in Ukraine, yeah, fear and despair and grief everywhere, okay? Or middle of downtown Chicago. People slaughtered every weekend. We think what's going on in Afghanistan and Iraq, there's been more people murdered in Chicago than, don't get me going. Anyways. Between the other constant one, the smell and sense just a little of fear, because mostly of despair and grief, the old fierce pull of blood. What's the old fierce pull of blood? Literally blood pulling? No. But it's old and it's fierce. And it has to do with blood. What's meant by blood?
Maybe it's like his connection to his father, like pulling him in.
Kin. Use the language that's going to be used in here. Kin. Okay? The connection you have with your family. It might be your immediate family. It might be your extended family. It might be your immediate and your extended family. It might be your living immediate and extended family, and it might be your living and dead living and extended, immediate and extended family. Remember what I said about Hawthorne? He was a relative of, or one of his ancestors was the governor of Massachusetts at the time when the Salem witch trials occurred. That fact that he was related, okay, to the people who burned witches troubled Hawthorne to no end. That's why almost every one of his stories is bleak. Minister's Black Veil, Young Goodman Brown. Read The House of Seven Gables. What's it about? Ghosts. Family ghosts. Plaguing the people who live in the house. Great story, by the way. So, what's the old fierce pull of blood? He couldn't see the table where the justice of the peace and his father sat. And notice, when he thinks of his father, he thinks of his father's enemy. And then what are we told? And this is the first time that the way the story is written, it visually tells us that the narrator is literally taking us inside the boy's mind. We've already been told that the narrator is going inside the boy's mind, right? Because we're told what the boy smells. The boy doesn't say, I smell cheese, or I know I smell cheese. I know I smell meat. The boy doesn't verbalize that. Okay? The narrator takes us into his mind and tells us that's what he's thinking. This time, however, we're told through the use of italics. This is what the boy's actually thinking. Our enemy. Old, fierce pool of blood. What's just happened? The enemy of my father is my enemy. Why? Because he's my father. That's it. Our, mine and his and both. So, we finally hear somebody speak. But what proof have you, Mr. Harris? Justice of the Peace is speaking. And Mr. Harris says, I told you. The hog got into my corn. Now whose hog? We don't know yet. Just a hog gets into his corn. Describe a hog. Anybody? Not rocket science, just describe a hog.
Wild pig.
Wild pig. Not always wild.
Big.
How big?
Pretty big.
This isn't Porky Pig. This isn't, some little, oh, look at that, it's cute. Like people who have, I don't remember what they're called, pygmy pigs and they have them in their house. No. How big is a hog? I've literally seen them shoulders, like a dog. You touch the top of a dog's back just behind its neck, those are its shoulders. I've literally seen hogs where its shoulders are here. As tall as I am, 5'10". Big, stinking bacon factories, Big hogs, right? Not saying this one is that big. 13-year-old kid somewhere in Georgia, 5 or 10 years ago, shot like a 1,500-pound hog. Thing was like 6.5, it was wild. It was like 6.5 feet tall at the shoulder. If it's that tall at the shoulder, that means this hog is like 7 or 8 feet long. Kill you very, very easily. So, hog got into my corn. I caught it up, I sent it back to him. He had no fence that would hold it. I told him so, warned him. The next time what? The next time the hog got into his corn. So this is now twice. I put the hog in my pen. When he came to get it, I gave him enough wire to patch up his pen. The next time, third time, so what does it sound like when he says, I gave him enough wire? If you've ever done any kind of fencing work, it might be, he's just got a hole in his fence big enough for a hog to get through. 3 feet wide. And so he gives him enough wire to fix that. 4 feet wide, 5 feet wide, 10 feet wide. We're going to find out in a moment. He gives them a spool with wire on it. That's more than just a few feet. Okay? So, the next time, I put the hog up and kept it. So, hog gets into his corn, warned him. Next time he puts the hog in his pen, he gives him wire to fix his fence. Next time he puts the hog up and keeps it, this is the third time the hog's gotten out and into this guy's corn. I rode down to his house and I saw the wire I gave him still rolled onto the spool. So if it's still rolled onto the spool, that's probably telling us there are several feet of wire on this thing. So what does that tell us about the person whose hog keeps getting out?
He doesn't care.
He doesn't care. See, one of my students in my previous class said he's lazy. Could be he's lazy. It could also be blank you and your wire. I'm not going to fix it. I told him he could have the hog when he paid me $1 pound fee. Impound like fee. That evening, a nigger came with the $1 and got the hog. Okay? That might suggest to us that the person who owns the hog is so well off he can pay someone to do this. The guy who comes to get the hog. It's not slavery, because slavery's, we're going to find out later, there aren't any slaves anymore. All right, this is the 1890s. The heck does that sound? He goes on. He said, the person who comes to collect the hog, he said He said to tell you, wood and hay can burn. What? That's what he say. He said to tell you, wood and hay can burn. So he not only comes to pay the dollar, get the hog, but also does what? Threatens. He delivers a warning. Where's the nigger? Have you got him? That is, now that kind of implies, have you tied him up? Have you, quote unquote, kept him? And he said, no, I don't know what became of him. But that's not proof. Why isn't that proof? He just told him what he said. In a court of law, if you've watched any TV law shows, what is that called? It's hearsay evidence. I heard it. I'm saying what I heard. You have to get the person who said what you heard to actually come and say it. If he could produce the quote-unquote nigger, he could say, yeah, that man there told me to tell him wood and hay can burn. See, that would be proof. But he's not there. Get that boy up here. No, not him. The little one. So what is Mr. Harris suggesting the justice of the peace require of the little boy sitting in the back thinking he smells fish and cheese?
Give a testimony.
Come up here and testify against your daddy. So the boy goes up. He sees the justice of the peace, a shabby, collarless, graying man in spectacles beckoning him. And he walks up there, and the boy thinks, when he walks past his father, he aims for me to lie. That is, my father wants me to lie, and I will have to do it. Why will he have to do it? Blood. He doesn't want his father to go to jail. What's your name, boy? The justice asks. Colonel Sartor Snopes. He whispers. What? Talk louder. Colonel Sartoris. Okay. The Snopes family figures prominently in all of Faulkner's novels. They're a famous family. Colonel Sartoris would be our real world equivalent, if you're from Mississippi, like Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederacy, or Robert E. Lee, Master General, so to speak. If you're a white family living in from when this is set, 1870s, 1880s Mississippi, and you have sons, pretty good chance one of them's going to be named Jefferson Davis, whatever the last name is, or Braxton Bragg, or drive around Murfreesboro, you'll see a bunch of these names. Still, okay? Or Nathan Bedford Forrest, where I did my PhD, is in Forrest County, named after Forrest. So, he says, well, if you're named after him, then I don't think you can help but tell the truth. Why? Oh, Jefferson Davis, like bowing to Buddha, so to speak. And we're told, the boy thinks, enemy. For a moment he could not see that the justice's face was kindly, nor discern that his voice was troubled when he spoke to the man named Harris. Do you want me to question this boy? What's that telling us about the justice of the peace? Why are we told his face is kindly? What's the boy thinking? What word has he repeated in his mind? Enemy. What do you do to enemies? Boom. But we're told by the narrator, the justice is what? Kind. The justice is troubled by the thought of questioning this boy. Why? Well, if he's asking him to testify against his father, what kind of position does that put the boy in? Rock, meet hard place. Hammer, meet anvil. Boy. No damnation, send him out of here. What's that tell us about Mr. Harris? He doesn't want to put that boy in that position either. So the justice says, case is closed. I can't find against the defendant. I can't prove, I can't argue he's guilty. I haven't had any proof. Could the boy give proof? It's kind of implied, yeah, he could. He was there. So, what does the justice say? Snopes, leave this country, get out of here by nightfall. I aim to, and he finally speaks. I don't figure to stay in a country among people who, and it's not printed. Why is it not printed? Because the narrator tells us it's unprintable. He uses language we don't use in polite society. That'll do, you get your wagon and get out of here. So they turn, and the boy follows his father, and they step down into the May dust. So what time of year? May. Late spring. Some might call it early summer. Okay. What else is May? Planting season. Okay? Because we're going to be told in a moment what they're going, where they're going, and what they're going to do, essentially for the next 8 months. So, somebody says, barn burner, as they make their way down, and we're told, again, talk about the boy, he could not see whirling. Why is he whirling? Is he just turning to see who said that? No, I think he's turning like this. Called my daddy a barn burner. Them's fighting words, you know. And he gets beat up. Father picks him up, says, go get in the wagon. The mother tries to come out of the wagon to clean him up. He says, stay there, he's fine, etc., etc. Okay? They go on a bit. Next page. The wagon goes on. He didn't know where they were going. None of them ever did. What does that imply? They've done this before. Because it was always somewhere, always a house of sorts. Think about that moment, that phrase for a moment. A house of sorts. You call up a realtor and you want to buy a house. Do you say, I need a house of sorts? Of sorts kind of implies what about the house?
Not really a house.
Yeah, it might be a house, it might not be a house. It might just have like 3 walls and a roof. And it'd be waiting for them a day or 2 or maybe even 3 days away. Likely his father had already arranged to make a crop on the farm before he before he what? Yeah, before he burned down the previous guy's barn. Okay? So, I didn't even talk about this paragraph in my previous class. I need to go back and do that because of the language that's used next. Talking about his father. There was something about his wolf-like independence and even courage when the advantage was at least neutral. Hold on a second here. Which impressed strangers as if they got from his latent, ravening ferocity not so much a sense of dependability as a feeling that his ferocious conviction in the rightness of his own actions would be of advantage to all whose interest lay with his. Again, that sentence is 5 lines long. So unpack it. There was something about his wolf-like independence and even courage when the advantage was at least neutral, which impressed strangers. let's stop there for a moment. Are wolves independent creatures?
No, they run in packs.
They run in packs. There's a terrorist incident. What's one of the first questions asked? Is it part of a pack, a cell, or is this the phrase that's usually used, lone wolf scenario? Where do you get lone wolves? Why is a lone wolf, L-O-N-E, not a loned wolf, L-O-A-N, why is a lone wolf so dangerous?
Because they're willing to do just about anything.
Okay, possibly. Why else?
Trying to find pack.
Keep going. They've been kicked out of the pack. So if a pack of wolves won't
Won't
accept you, what's that say about you? You don't play well with others. If you're a lone wolf, we can use all different kinds of metaphors. You're about to go postal. You've got a short fuse. Okay? You're antisocial. So, something about his wolf-like independence. See, that should send alarm bells. Wolves aren't independent. They're social creatures, right? And even courage when the advantage was at least neutral, which impressed strangers. So his independence and his courage, notice, when the advantage was neutral, or at least neutral, impresses strangers. Okay? Strangers look at him and go, man, look at that guy. Conquering the world, taking the bull by the horn, so to speak. As if they got, that is, the strangers watching him, as if they got from his latent, ravening ferocity. What does latent mean? Just beneath the surface. Okay? What's the problem with somebody with the short fuse? What's it take to set them off? Not much. Really, really not much. It could be a word. Apparently I had a student with the short fuse last fall. Said something the first day of class. Complaint was made. My life was hell for about the next 4 weeks. One word. Okay? That's kind of, or, you say something and somebody comes in with an AR-15 and just starts, spraying bullets. That's happened. It happens every year. Okay, so his latent, ravening, what does it mean to be ravenous? If you don't eat for several days or you don't eat for several hours and you say, oh, I'm ravenous, I could eat a horse. Okay, if you can eat a horse, then how hungry are you? You're really hungry, right? Okay. Latent, just beneath the surface, ravening ferocity. What's the ferocity? If you're ferocious, what's it take to set the father off? Not much. And when you do set him off, what? Back up. Because this isn't just going to be a firecracker. This is going to be like a weapons depot. Boom. All right? His latent, ravenous ferocity, not so much as if they got from this ferocity, not so much a sense of dependability. That is, that you can depend on this happening, as a feeling that his ferocious conviction, so here's that word ferocious again, in the rightness of his own actions would be of advantage to all whose interests lay with his. In other words, they looked at him in his behavior and said, if our ideas, if our desires, if our plans coincide with, point in the same direction as his, we're going to win. Because all we have to do is kind of point Abner this direction, and everything out there is going to be destroyed. Because of what? His ferocious conviction in the rightness of his own actions. What does Abner never do?
Believe that he's
Louder?
believe that he's wrong.
Believe that he's wrong. Believe that he even may be wrong. Okay? I'm always right. Period. You ever know anybody like that? I've known a few. I've been that person at times. So they camp that night, and he builds a fire. Where does he get the wood for the fire? Fence. He just takes a piece of wood from the fence, builds a fire. Does he build a big fire? Keep everybody warm. That big bonfire, let's do marshmallow. Nope. He builds a little teeny tiny fire. We're told. The nights were still cool. They had a fire against it of a rail lifted from a nearby fence, cut into lengths, a small fire, neat, niggard almost. Niggard. What does that word mean? It has nothing to do with Nigger. Professor at a school years ago got in a lot of trouble because he used the word Niggard, and a student thought he said something else. Okay? It means cheap. Not cheap like poorly made. It means like cheap, like he's a cheap bastard. He won't even pay for a good meal when he takes, so-and-so out for dinner. Right? Thrifty. Okay? I mean, think about it. If you're loaded and you're married, and your wife's birthday is coming up, and you get her, a watch from Walmart. I mean, you're loaded, like you can afford a Rolex without a problem, and you get your wife a Timex from Walmart with the $14.90. That means you're a cheap bastard. Okay, that's the kind of fire he builds. He doesn't spend much on it. Such fires were his father's habit and custom. And then the narrator tells us, older. When the boy is older, he might have remarked. That is, we're presuming, should the boy live long enough, and he gets to a little bit older age, he might think this about why his father built these kinds of fires. He might have wondered, why not build a big one? Really? Whose wood is he burning? Not his own. I mean, light the sucker up. Why should not a man who had not only seen the waste and extravagance of war, but who had in his blood an inherent voracious prodigality, with material not his own, have burned everything in sight? Notice that description. He had in his blood, in his very being, his nature, what? A voracious prodigality. What's it mean to be voracious? It's kind of like ravenous. If you're talking about food, you eat everything in sight. You go to a restaurant that has the buffet kind of thing, and you pile it on, and you empty that plate, and you go get another, and you pile it on. But this is a voracious prodigality. Prodigality means generosity, liberalness, not political liberalness, but liberality, with stuff not his own. Like, I'm going to take all this stuff, and all your stuff, and all your stuff, and burn it all. Why? Because I'm not going to burn mine. Why would he do that? Then, a little older, he might have gone a step further and thought, well, that's the reason. That niggard blaze, that little cheap, chintzy blaze, it's the living fruit of nights passed during those 4 years in the woods, hiding from all men, blue or gray. What are those 4 years? Civil War, 61 through 65. Notice who he's hiding from. Blue and gray. Both sides. He's not a Confederate. He's not a Yankee. They both hate him. Why is he hiding? With his strings of horses, captured horses, he called them. Now, earlier, in one of the beginning paragraphs, what are we told about the father? He walks with a limp. Why does he walk with a limp? It was when they were leaving the general store. Because he was caught in the heel by a Confederate's musket ball, fleeing on a stolen horse. Stealing a horse, 19th century, most, many states in the United States, capital offense. Capital meaning you die. Okay? And if it's, out in the country, we don't need no judge. We don't need no jury. It's just me and Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson gonna solve the problem, okay? And older still, he might have divined the true reason that the element of fire spoke to some deep mainspring of his father's being, as the elements of steel or powder spoke to other men, as the one weapon for the preservation of integrity. Notice, fire is for him like a sword or a pistol is for other men to preserve his integrity. Well, how do you use a sword or pistol to preserve your integrity? I've never made this connection before. I've been teaching this damn story for 30 years. A duel. Why did men, get involved in duels all the way up through the early 19th century? Alexander Hamilton died from a duel. What was he defending? His honor. How do you fight duels? 2 ways. I guess you could be stupid and do it by hand. Sword or pistols at 20 paces. He doesn't use a sword. He doesn't use a pistol. What's he use? Gasoline, kerosene. Okay. I don't know if you've ever been on fire before. I could pull up my pant leg. I've been on fire before. 3rd-degree burns when I was 6 years old. Not pleasant. I would much rather be stabbed, hopefully once through the heart, or shot, than to be burned alive. Okay? Fire is his chosen method. It's not literally chosen, though, because notice the narrator says, it speaks to some deep mainspring of his being. It's like, even though I've been on fire, I do have a pyro, part of me. I like to watch things burn, That's him. That's him. Okay? So, father takes him aside. You were fixing to tell them. You would have told them. Boy doesn't say anything. Smack. But it's a smack, we're told, without heat. Why? Heat is an element of fire. He doesn't waste heat. He doesn't waste fire. This is just good old discipline. Smacks him upside the head. Answer me. Yes. Yes, Daddy. Is that true? I don't know. I don't know if the boy really would have told them. Because the boy told us, through the narrator's description, he wants me to lie, and I will have to do it. But the father says, you would have told the truth. And he says, yes'm. I think he says yes'm because he doesn't want to get smacked again. Okay? So, the next morning they're there. They arrive at the house, if you want to call it a house. One of the sisters, the bovine twins, let's call them, because they're both described as being bovine-like. What's bovine mean? Cow. Big girls, okay? One of the sisters says, likely it ain't fitting for hogs. And he says, it'll fit you, and you'll hog it too. Wow. What kind of family do we have here? Loving, honest. So the sisters get down, they help unpack. The brother gets down, he starts helping unpack. And the father takes the boy, Sardi, or Colonel Sartoris, where? Up to the big house. And the wife says, Mother, Abner, he said, I'm just going up there to talk to the man who's going to own me, body and soul, for the next 8 months. They're sharecroppers. Okay? Sharecroppers, okay, notice my language here, kind of like slavery. Not the same. That's why I say kind of. Why? Because you agree to essentially live for, serve somebody else for a period of time until you pay off a debt. The debt is what you agree to produce for that person. It's kind of like indentured servitude. You know, a lot of people when they first came to the United States, when it was the colonies, came as indentured servants. They would agree, I will work for you for a period of time, 3, 5, 7, 9. Usually I think the numbers were 7, 9, and 11 for prime numbers for some reason. 7, 11 are prime. Period of years. Once that period is over, you got your freedom. His, however, in sharecropping, you agree to produce a certain number of bushels of whatever the product is within a certain time frame. Okay? Let's say the guy has 400 acres and you're required to produce 1,000 bushels of corn from that. Well, from that 400 acres, part of your negotiation, part of your agreement is you get 20 of that for yourself. So whatever you produce out of that 20 acres, that's what you keep for you and your family. But you still got to get 1,000 bushels out of here. Well, if you only get 900 out of here, then you got to get 100 out of your own to fill that quota of 1,000. Maybe it's a bad year, and you don't get the 900 or the 1,000. Guess what? That contract gets extended. That's how you become a permanent sharecropper, kind of a thing. Okay? So he goes up to the house. I'm not going to get to everywhere I need to, but we'll get close. No, we won't. No, we'll stop there. We'll stop there. So we'll pick up on 410, which has us about 2-3 pages behind my other class. We'll get caught up. So for Friday, definitely finish this. Remember, there's a quiz due tonight. It's extra credit. Don't cheat. I told my first class, somebody from one of the 2 classes did exactly what I said not to do that first day. When I talked about, showing and telling and how does an author, somebody did the exact thing I said do not do. They got on Google, the first thing there. So, it's due 11:59 tonight. It's extra credit. Have a good day. See you on Friday. Wake up.